Ethan Blake was not a man who dreamed of adventure. He lived a simple life in Chicago, working as a janitor to pay the bills. His days were spent mopping floors, emptying trash cans, and scrubbing stains from walls that no one cared about anymore. At 52 years old, Ethan had grown used to being invisible, blending into the background like the faded paint on the buildings he cleaned. But all of that changed one cold, quiet evening. It was late, and Ethan was finishing up his shift at an old warehouse on the edge of the city. The place had been abandoned for years, its windows cracked, and its walls covered in graffiti. Most people avoided it, but Ethan didn't mind. It gave him peace, a chance to think without the noise of the world pressing down on him. As he pushed his mop across the dirty floor, he noticed something strange, a faint glow coming from the far corner of the room. Curious, Ethan walked closer, squinting through the dim light. What he saw made his heart skip a beat. There, hovering silently in the air, was a shimmering circle of light. It looked like a doorway, but instead of leading to another part of the warehouse, it seemed to open into nothingness. Ethan froze, gripping his mop tightly, as if it could protect him from whatever might come through. Then, two figures stepped out of the glowing portal. They were tall and thin, with elongated limbs and shiny, insect-like eyes. Their skin glowed faintly, and they wore sleek, metallic suits that reflected the dim light around them. "Greetings, human," one of them said in a voice that sounded both mechanical and musical. "We mean you no harm." Ethan blinked, unsure if he was dreaming or losing his mind. Hi," he managed to say, clutching the mop handle even tighter. The taller alien introduced itself as Kryle, while the shorter one called itself Vesa. They explained that they were members of the Zorvith race, travelers from a distant part of the galaxy. Their spaceship, they said, was in desperate need of cleaning. Centuries of interstellar journeys had left it cluttered, messy, and nearly unusable. They had searched many worlds for someone who could help, and now they had found Ethan. "You want me to clean your spaceship?" Ethan asked, his voice rising in disbelief. "Yes," Vesa replied simply. "You are skilled in this task, are you not?" Ethan hesitated. Cleaning offices in Chicago was one thing, but stepping onto an alien spaceship, that was madness. Still, when Krill mentioned payment, enough money to change his life forever, Ethan felt a flicker of hope. He thought about his tiny apartment, his mounting debts, and the endless struggle just to get by. Maybe this was his chance to finally break free. "All right," Ethan said after a long pause. "I'll do it." Kryle and Vesa exchanged glances, their insect-like faces unreadable. Then, without another word, they gestured for Ethan to follow them. Taking a deep breath, Ethan stepped toward the glowing portal. As he passed through, the world around him dissolved into light and sound. When he opened his eyes again, he found himself standing inside the largest, strangest room he had ever seen. The walls shimmered, the air hummed with energy, and piles of alien junk stretched as far as he could see. "Well," Ethan muttered to himself, looking around, "this is gonna take some work." Ethan stood in awe as he took in the massive spaceship. It was like nothing he had ever imagined. The floors beneath his feet felt smooth and cool, almost alive, glowing faintly with a soft blue light. The walls curved upward into a ceiling so high it disappeared into shadows. Everywhere he looked, there were piles of strange objects, some shiny and metallic, others squishy and gooey, and a few that seemed to pulse with a life of their own. Alien tools, broken gadgets, and unidentifiable junk filled every corner of the room. "This is your ship?" Ethan asked, turning to Kryle and Vesa. His voice echoed slightly in the vast space. "Yes," Kryle replied, clicking its mandibles together in what Ethan guessed was embarrassment. "It has been neglected." "Neglected," Ethan repeated, raising an eyebrow. "This place looks like a tornado hit a junkyard." Vesa made a chirping sound, which Ethan decided must have been laughter. "We are not built for such tasks," she explained. Our kind focuses on exploration, science, and discovery. Cleaning is inefficient for us." Ethan sighed, shaking his head. He glanced down at the mop still clutched in his hand and wondered if he'd bitten off more than he could chew. But then he remembered the promise of payment, the chance to finally escape the endless cycle of debt and struggle back on Earth. Taking a deep breath, he nodded. "Okay," he said firmly. "Let's get to work." The aliens led him deeper into the ship, showing him storage rooms crammed with tangled wires, kitchens overrun with mysterious slime, and hallways littered with debris. Ethan couldn't help but chuckle under his breath. For all their advanced technology, these aliens sure didn't know how to keep things tidy. Kryle handed Ethan a small device that looked like a cross between a vacuum cleaner and a flashlight. "This will assist you," Kryle said. "It is designed to clean organic matter." Ethan tested the gadget on a sticky green blob clinging to the wall. To his surprise, the blob vanished instantly, leaving behind a perfectly clean surface. "Not bad," Ethan muttered, grinning. He tucked the tool into his belt alongside his trusty mop and bucket, feeling a bit more confident about the job ahead. As Ethan began cleaning, Kryle and Vesa watched him closely, their insect-like eyes following his every move. At first, they seemed skeptical, whispering to each other in their strange clicking language. But when Ethan scrubbed away decades of grime from a control panel, revealing its sleek, polished surface, the aliens exchanged impressed glances. "You are quite skilled," Vesa admitted after a while. "Your methods are primitive, yet effective." "Thanks, I think," Ethan replied dryly, wiping sweat from his forehead. He was already starting to feel tired, but the satisfaction of seeing the ship transform kept him going. One section at a time, the clutter disappeared, replaced by gleaming floors and organized shelves. Toward the end of the day, Ethan found himself in what appeared to be the ship's main lounge. The room was filled with floating cushions, holographic screens, and strange plants that oozed a faint purple mist. In the center of the chaos sat a large furry creature with 6 legs and no visible eyes. It let out a low growl as Ethan approached. "What's this?" Ethan asked, pointing at the creature. "That is Grux," Vesa said casually. "He is our pet." "A pet? Looks more like a monster," Ethan muttered, keeping his distance. Grux sniffed the air, then lumbered over to inspect Ethan's mop. Before Ethan could react, the creature snatched the mop out of his hands and began chewing on it enthusiastically. "Hey," Ethan shouted, trying to grab it back. "That's my mop." Kryle clicked his mandibles again, sounding amused. "Grux likes new toys." Ethan groaned, watching as Grux reduced his mop to splinters. "Great, just great." Despite the setback, Ethan pressed on. By the time he finished for the day, the lounge sparkled, and even Grux seemed happier, curling up in a corner with the remains of the mop. As Ethan leaned against a freshly cleaned wall, exhausted but proud, he realized something. This job might be harder than he expected, but it was also kind of fun. For the first time in years, Ethan Blake felt like he was doing something important. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling a mix of excitement and dread. He had slept in a small cabin the aliens had provided for him, a tiny room with glowing walls, and a bed that floated a few inches off the ground. It was strange but comfortable, and Ethan found himself wondering how long it would take to get used to living on a spaceship. After a quick breakfast of alien food cubes, which tasted like a mix of oatmeal and bubblegum, he grabbed his cleaning supplies and headed back to work. Kryle and Vesa greeted him in the main corridor, their insect-like faces unreadable as always. "Today, we focus on the engine room," Kryle said, leading the way. Ethan followed them down a narrow hallway lined with pipes and blinking lights. The further they went, the hotter it got, until Ethan could feel sweat dripping down his back. When they reached the engine room, Ethan stopped in his tracks. The space was filled with towering machines, tangled wires, and pools of oily liquid. Sparks flew from one corner, and a low rumbling sound filled the air. It looked like chaos had exploded in there. "This is your engine room?" Ethan asked, his voice rising. "It's a disaster zone." Vesa clicked her mandibles nervously. "Yes, well, the engines still function, mostly." "Mostly," Ethan repeated, raising an eyebrow. "You guys are lucky this whole ship hasn't blown up yet." Kryl gestured toward the mess. "We trust you will fix it." Ethan sighed but got to work. Using the alien gadget Kryl had given him, he started clearing away the grime and slime coating the machinery. The device worked wonders, sucking up dirt and oil like a vacuum cleaner on steroids. For the tougher stains, Ethan relied on his old-fashioned mop and bucket, scrubbing until his hands were sore. As the hours passed, the engine room began to change. The once dingy walls gleamed, the floors were spotless, and the machines hummed smoothly, free of dust and debris. Ethan even managed to untangle some of the wires, organizing them into neat bundles. By the time he finished, the engine room looked almost brand new. Kryl and Vesa inspected his work, their insect-like eyes wide with amazement. "Incredible," Kryl said. "You have exceeded our expectations." Ethan grinned, wiping his forehead with the back of his hand. "Just doing my job." Later that day, Ethan moved on to the crew quarters. These rooms were smaller but just as messy as the rest of the ship. Clothes, alien clothes, at least, were scattered everywhere, along with empty food wrappers, broken gadgets, and what looked like alien toys. Ethan shook his head as he picked up a squishy, glowing ball that made a chirping noise when he touched it. "These guys really need to learn how to pick up after themselves," Ethan muttered to himself. He worked quickly, folding clothes, or at least trying to. They were shaped weird, tossing trash into bags, and organizing personal items into drawers. One of the aliens, a short, round creature named Zix, hovered nearby, watching curiously. "What are you doing?" Zix asked in a high-pitched voice. "Cleaning," Ethan replied, holding up a pile of folded clothes. "Ever heard of it?" Zix tilted its head, confused. "Why?" Ethan chuckled. "Because it makes life easier. Trust me." By the end of the day, the crew quarters were tidy and organized. The aliens seemed pleased, though Ethan noticed they still weren't great at keeping things clean. Grux, the six-legged pet, wandered in at one point and knocked over a stack of neatly arranged gadgets. Ethan groaned but decided not to let it bother him too much. That night, as Ethan lay in his floating bed, he thought about how far he'd come in just a few days. The asterisk starship Zenith Asterisk was starting to look like a completely different place, thanks to his hard work. But deep down, he wondered if the aliens truly appreciated what he was doing, or if they'd go back to their messy ways once he left. Still, for now, Ethan felt proud of what he'd accomplished. He closed his eyes, letting the soft hum of the ship lull him to sleep. The next morning, Ethan woke up to a strange sound, a loud clanging noise followed by muffled shouts. He climbed out of his floating bed and hurried toward the source of the commotion. When he arrived in the main corridor, he found Kryl and Vesa pacing back and forth, their insect-like faces twisted in frustration. "What's going on?" Ethan asked, rubbing sleep from his eyes. "We cannot find anything," Vesa exclaimed, her voice sharp with panic. "The ship is too clean." Ethan blinked, confused. "Too clean? I thought that was a good thing." "It is, but now everything is hidden," Kryl explained, clicking his mandibles rapidly. "We do not know where our tools are, or our equipment, or even our food supplies. Your organization has made them disappear." Ethan crossed his arms, trying not to laugh. "They're not disappeared. They're just organized. You guys need to adapt." But the aliens didn't seem amused. Zix floated over, holding a glowing tablet. "Xenera says the navigation console is missing," Zix said nervously. "Without it, we cannot plot our course." Ethan frowned. Xenera was the ship's AI system, and apparently, it couldn't keep up with his cleaning spree either. He sighed and grabbed his trusty mop. All right, show me where you last saw this navigation console. The group led Ethan to what used to be a cluttered storage room. Now, it was filled with neatly labeled shelves and stacked containers. Ethan scanned the area, then pointed to a box marked Navigation Equipment. Sure enough, inside was the console they were looking for. There, Ethan said, handing it to Kryle. See, not lost, just relocated. Kryle stared at the device, then at Ethan. This will take some getting used to. Over the next few hours, similar problems kept popping up. An alien chef named Ralks couldn't find his cooking tools because Ethan had sorted them into drawers. A scientist named Trelk complained that his research samples were missing, only for Ethan to discover they'd been placed in a refrigerated compartment for safekeeping. Even Grux, the six-legged pet, seemed confused, sniffing around empty corners where its toys used to be. By lunchtime, Ethan was starting to feel overwhelmed. The alien's frustration was growing, and he began to wonder if he'd gone too far. Cleaning was supposed to make life easier, not harder. As he sat down to eat a bland alien sandwich, Trelk approached him. "You have done excellent work," Trelk said quietly, his voice calm compared to the others. "But perhaps we need a better way to track things." Ethan nodded, chewing slowly. "Like a map or something." "Something like that," Trelk agreed. "Our technology can create a digital inventory system. It would show us exactly where everything is located." "That's a great idea," Ethan said, perking up. "Can you build it?" Trelk hesitated. "I can try, but I may need your help." Together, Ethan and Trelk spent the afternoon working on the project. Ethan explained how humans used labels and categories to stay organized, while Trelk adapted the ship's AI to recognize the new system. By evening, they had created a basic inventory program that displayed the location of every item on the ship. When they presented it to the crew, the aliens were amazed. "This is remarkable," Kryle said, examining the holographic map. "Now we can find what we need without searching endlessly." Vesa smiled, a rare sight, and patted Ethan on the shoulder. "You continue to surprise us, human." Ethan grinned, feeling a sense of accomplishment. But as he walked back to his cabin, he realized something important. Being organized wasn't just about tidying up. It was about making sure everyone could still find what they needed. And for the first time since stepping aboard the Starship Zenith *, Ethan felt like he truly belonged. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling hopeful. The new inventory system seemed to be working well, and the aliens appeared less stressed. He decided to focus on finishing the last few areas of the ship that still needed attention. But as he made his way to the cargo bay, he noticed something unusual. The lights in the hallway flickered, and a low buzzing sound echoed through the corridors. Ethan frowned. "That doesn't sound good," he muttered to himself. He quickened his pace, heading toward the source of the noise. When he reached the engine room, he found Trelk and Zix huddled over a control panel, their faces tense. "What's wrong?" Ethan asked, stepping closer. "The power levels are dropping," Trelk explained, his voice tight with worry. "If we don't fix it soon, the ship's systems will fail." Ethan looked around. The once pristine engine room now felt ominous, the machines glowing dimly instead of brightly. "Do you know what's causing it?" Zix floated nervously. "We think it might be the energy conduits. They're clogged or damaged, but we can't locate the tools to repair them." Ethan sighed. This was exactly the kind of problem his cleaning spree had caused. Tools were no longer scattered randomly. They were tucked away in labeled drawers and shelves. But without the inventory system fully updated, finding them quickly was still a challenge. "Okay, let's figure this out," Ethan said firmly. "Where did you usually keep the tools before I cleaned up?" Trelk pointed to a corner of the room. "Over there, but everything has been moved." Ethan nodded and pulled out his mop bucket, which now doubled as a toolbox for emergencies. He also grabbed the alien gadget Kryle had given him earlier. Together, they began searching through nearby cabinets and compartments. It wasn't long before Ethan spotted a set of shiny metallic tools inside a drawer marked Engine Maintenance. "Here," Ethan called, holding up the tools. "Will these work?" Trelk's eyes lit up. "Yes, those are perfect." Working quickly, Ethan handed Trelk the tools he needed while Zix monitored the control panel. Ethan didn't understand much about alien technology, but he could tell Trelk was skilled. The engineer worked methodically, repairing wires and adjusting settings until the buzzing sound faded and the lights returned to their normal glow. "That should do it," Trelk said, wiping his hands. "Thank you, Ethan. Without your help, we might not have fixed it in time." Ethan smiled, though he felt a pang of guilt. "I guess my cleaning caused more trouble than I thought." "No," Trelk replied gently. "Your efforts made the ship better. We just need to adapt to the changes." Later that day, Ethan gathered the crew in the lounge to discuss how they could prevent future problems. Vesa suggested adding labels to every storage area, while Kryl proposed training sessions for the aliens to learn basic organization skills. Ethan even offered to teach them simple cleaning techniques, earning a few amused clicks and chirps from the group. Grux, the six-legged pet, wandered in during the meeting, carrying one of Ethan's mops in its mouth. The creature dropped it at Ethan's feet and let out a happy growl. Ethan laughed, scratching Grux behind its furry ears. "You really like that mop, huh?" Ethan said, shaking his head. "Maybe I'll leave it here for you when I'm gone." The aliens exchanged glances, their expressions unreadable. "Gone?" Vesa asked. "You are leaving?" Ethan hesitated. He hadn't thought about it much, but eventually he would have to return to Earth. "Well, yeah," he said slowly. "I mean, I can't stay here forever, right?" Kryl and Vesa looked at each other, then back at Ethan. "We assumed you would remain with us," Kryl said. "You have become an important part of the crew." Ethan felt a lump in his throat. He hadn't expected the aliens to see him as anything more than a temporary janitor. For the first time, he wondered if maybe, just maybe, he could find a new home among the stars. As the meeting ended, Ethan stayed behind in the lounge, staring out of a large window at the endless expanse of space. The idea of staying on the Starship Zenith Asterisk felt both exciting and terrifying. But one thing was certain, whether he left or stayed, Ethan Blake was no longer the same man who had stepped through that glowing portal days ago. A few days later, Ethan was in the middle of organizing the medical bay when the ship suddenly shook violently. He stumbled, grabbing onto a nearby table to steady himself. Alarms blared throughout the corridors, and red warning lights flashed overhead. "What's happening?" Ethan shouted as Kryl and Vesa rushed into the room. "Asteroid field." Vesa replied, her voice sharp with urgency. "The hull has been damaged." Ethan's heart raced. He followed the aliens to the command center, where the crew was gathered around a large screen showing the ship's exterior. Rocks of all sizes were hurtling past the Starship Zenith Asterisk, some colliding with its shimmering shields. Occasionally, a particularly large asteroid would break through, striking the hull with a deafening crash. "We need to repair the breach immediately," Kryl said, his mandibles clicking rapidly, "or the ship will lose pressure." Trelk turned to Ethan. "Do you know where the emergency repair kits are?" Ethan froze for a moment, his mind racing. He had organized those kits just days ago, placing them in labeled compartments near the damaged sections of the ship. But with the chaos of the asteroid field, he wasn't sure if anyone else knew where to look. "They're in Section D7, Ethan said quickly. "I'll show you." The group hurried through the shaking corridors, dodging falling debris as they went. When they reached Section D7, Ethan opened the storage compartment and pulled out several sleek metallic cases. Inside were tools, sealant patches, and other equipment designed to fix breaches in the hull. "Good work," Trelk said, grabbing a case. "Let's move." The team split up, each heading to a different part of the ship to patch the damage. Ethan stayed close to Trelk, helping him carry tools and hold patches in place while the engineer worked. The air grew colder as they approached one of the breaches, and Ethan could hear the faint hiss of escaping oxygen. "This is bad," Ethan muttered, gripping a patch tightly. "It will hold, for now," Trelk replied, sealing the breach with quick, precise movements. "But we must hurry." Back in the command center, Vesa monitored the ship's systems, her glowing eyes darting across the screens. "Shields are down to 20%, she announced. "We cannot withstand many more impacts." Kryl took control of the navigation panel, attempting to steer the ship out of the asteroid field. But the rocks were everywhere, closing in from all sides. Just when it seemed like there was no escape, Ethan noticed something on one of the monitors, a narrow gap between two massive asteroids. "There." Ethan pointed at the screen. "Can you squeeze through that?" Kryl hesitated, calculating the risk. Finally, he nodded. "It is our only chance." With careful precision, Kryl guided the asterisk starship Zenith asterisk toward the gap. The ship shuddered as it passed through, narrowly avoiding collisions on both sides. Once they were clear, the alarm stopped, and the red warning lights faded. The crew let out a collective sigh of relief. Vesa slumped into a chair, her insect-like body trembling slightly. "We made it," she whispered. Ethan looked around at the exhausted but grateful faces of the aliens. Despite the danger, they had worked together to save the ship, and he had played a key role. It was a feeling unlike anything he'd ever experienced. Later that night, as Ethan sat alone in the lounge, Kryl approached him. "You have proven yourself invaluable, Ethan Blake," Kryl said. "We owe you our lives." Ethan shrugged, embarrassed. "I just did what I could." "No," Kryl replied firmly. "You did far more than that. You brought order to our ship, solved problems we could not, and saved us today. You belong here, with us." Ethan felt a warmth spread through his chest. For so long he had felt invisible, unimportant. But now, surrounded by these strange yet kind creatures, he realized he had found a place where he truly mattered. As he gazed out at the stars streaking past the window, Ethan smiled. Maybe staying on the asterisk starship Zenith asterisk wasn't such a crazy idea after all. The next morning, Ethan woke up feeling different. He stood by the window in his floating cabin, staring at the endless expanse of space. The events of the past few days played over in his mind. The chaos, the teamwork, the near disaster with the asteroid field. Most of all, he thought about Kryl's words from the night before. "Asterisk, you belong here. With us, asterisk." For the first time in years, Ethan felt like he had a purpose. But he also knew he couldn't make such a big decision lightly. Staying on the asterisk starship Zenith asterisk meant leaving Earth behind. His old life, his city, everything familiar. Could he really do that? As he walked to the dining area for breakfast, he found the crew already gathered. They were unusually quiet, their insect-like eyes watching him closely. Vesa broke the silence. "Have you decided, Ethan?" she asked gently. Ethan hesitated. "I'm still thinking about it," he admitted. "It's not an easy choice." Frelk nodded. "We understand. But know this, you have earned our trust and respect. You are one of us now." Ethan smiled faintly, touched by their words. Over the next few hours, he wandered through the ship, looking at the changes he'd made. The once cluttered corridors were now clean and organized, the storage rooms neatly labeled, and even Grux seemed happier with his toys sorted into bins. Ethan realized how much he had grown to care about the asterisk Zenith asterisk and its crew. This wasn't just a job anymore. It was home. By evening, Ethan had made up his mind. He called everyone to the lounge, where they sat in a circle, waiting patiently. Taking a deep breath, Ethan spoke. "I've decided to stay," he said, his voice steady. "At least for now. I want to keep helping you guys, and maybe learn a thing or two along the way." The room erupted in cheers, or what passed for cheers among aliens. Kryl clicked his mandibles loudly, while Vesa clapped her hands together in delight. Even Grux let out a happy growl, bounding over to knock Ethan off his feet with a playful tackle. "Thank you, Ethan Blake," Kryl said, placing a hand on Ethan's shoulder. "You honor us with your choice." Over the following weeks, Ethan settled into his new role. He continued cleaning and organizing, but also started learning more about the ship's systems, thanks to Trelk's patient teaching. The aliens, in turn, began adopting some of Ethan's habits, labeling items and tidying up after themselves. Slowly but surely, the starship Zenith * became a better place, not just cleaner, but more functional and harmonious. Eventually, the day came for the Zorvaths to resume their journey across the galaxy. As the ship prepared to leave orbit, Ethan stood by the window, watching Earth shrink into a tiny blue dot. He felt a pang of sadness, but also excitement for what lay ahead. Back on Earth, rumors spread about a janitor who had vanished under mysterious circumstances. Some claimed he'd been abducted by aliens, while others joked that he'd finally cleaned himself out of a job. No one knew the truth, except Ethan, who occasionally gazed at the stars and smiled. On the starship Zenith *, life went on. Ethan became a legend among the crew, not just as a janitor, but as a friend and hero. And though the galaxy was vast and unpredictable, Ethan Blake no longer felt invisible. He had found his place among the stars, and he wouldn't trade it for anything.